Hey y'all, this is Kobe R. Rice, and I'm back again for another weekly creative update. And at this point, to pretend as though this is now or continues to be a weekly podcast is ludicrous. And as you guys know, that's for a bunch of different reasons. But wow, you actually might be seeing a lot more of me recently due to recent events. But let's just do this properly. So, hi, I'm Kobe R. Rice, novelist, game designer, dramaturg. I don't even remember all the other titles because things have just been so crazy. But screenwriter, TV writer, director, producer, narrative designer, and a bunch of other things that I will now be able to practice more consistently now that we are essentially all quarantined. So, oh gosh, I don't even know where to start. This is going to be a relatively brief podcast, but I wanted to put this out there because one, I have not been on here since January, and that is unacceptable. Mainly for myself, I want to be more present. But two, I felt as though it was super necessary to come on and just, I don't even want to say vent, but more so just pontificate and wax philosophical about the things that have been happening around the recent and unfortunate pandemic via the coronavirus. And I guess the first thing I'll start with is just some updates before I get into what's going on here in New York with the virus. We're actually, FYI, one of the states that are the most significantly impacted by the coronavirus spread, with specific concentrations in New York City and also in Westchester County, which is, as you can probably tell, one of those two places are where I live currently. So it's kind of a crazy situation, but we'll get into that in just a minute. I just want to give you guys a update on what I've been doing for the past couple of months. And now what I am doing at the moment, considering that we are essentially on quarantine and lockdown. So from January to March, first and foremost, as you guys know, I'm making this the year of silence, but I was not aware that the silence part come would become so literal, like so literal. That's one thing. But mainly what I've been working on is primarily my theater teaching. As you guys know, I'm a theater teacher at an urban high school in New York City, and just wrapping up most recently the unit on dramatic storytelling, which is really exciting. My students have submitted their 5 minute plays and screenplays for editing and publication. And I'm just super excited to really figure out and see what directions they're going in terms of story and everything like that. So that editing process, especially because we're now in this state of isolation and social distancing, is going to take a little bit longer than I thought it was going to. But it actually, how do you say a quarantine is a good thing? I'll say it's advantageous at this point that I now have some more time, flexibility, and space to focus on the scholar's work. So um, that published volume of their work will be coming up probably sometime, I would say late April, early May, to be honest with you, at this point. But that is basically what I have been working on and what the students have been working on for the past 2 months. And this unit, in and of itself, took about 8 weeks to get through from zero stage all the way to fully fledged. You guys now have all the tools you need to write these 5 minute plays stage. So I'm actually really happy with the structure of the unit, although I have my own critiques on what to do next time. So that actually I consider to be one of my successes of 2020, one of my first successes of 2020, and one of my, I wouldn't say first successes, but one of my significant successes as a theater teacher for 2019 to 2020 as a first time theater teacher in a charter school. So that's really exciting. The other thing that's been happening, as you guys know, we are now or were directing The Color Purple for it to open in late May at our school. And this is a co production between my high school and another high school under our charter. And so myself and the theater teacher of the other high school of the same charter came together to put on this production as we did for Romeo and Juliet in the fall of 2019. And thus far, it's been going really, really well. I've actually, at this point, taken more of a role as an assistant director as opposed to a co director for a variety of reasons. And I'm actually really happy with that aspect of it at this time because this year has just been so crazy with like just time commitments and just the number of commitments I had to make to work, to personal life, to family life, and things like that. Being able to kind of step back a little bit from that and take an assistant director role has actually been very beneficial to me. Although it was a rough transition for me personally in terms of figuring out how I was going to fit into this whole scenario. Um, Unfortunately, though, it seems as though the production is either going to be delayed or canceled or severely time crunched considering what's going on with the pandemic and the quarantine. So we have no idea if the CDC and the federal government are going to relax their restrictions at any point in time, such that we would have enough time to come back and finish a fully fledged rehearsal and do tech and do dress and do finish our costumes, finish our set. We're not sure if we'll have the time or the space to do that, considering we don't really know where the coronavirus is going to be as of April 19th, which is when we're going to return to school. Well, that's the planned return to school. Who knows what's actually going to happen between now and then? Hopefully, things will get better, but I'm hearing that we're going to see a spike in either coronavirus detections or coronavirus transmissions over the next couple months because our country was so late in getting on top of controlling the pandemic. And so now we have a bunch of people walking around who have no idea if they have coronavirus. And so until we get enough tests, until people are religiously following the quarantine and social distancing protocols, et cetera, until those things happen, we have no idea what the impact on our social and economic lives is going to be. So, having said that, our school is planning to return to the building on April 19th, which is great, but who knows if those things will be restricted again or if we have to extend the quarantine. So the production is sort of up in the air right now, and right now we're just sort of dealing with the present, checking in with our student performers and our just generally at my school, checking in with our students overall. Me checking in with my advisees to make sure that they're doing okay, make sure that they're provided for during this really challenging time, which again, I'll get more into as to what the specifics of our challenging times are just a little bit. But back to the resume of what's been going on. The Color Purple was going extremely well, and now it's really not going at all. So we'll see what happens with that. Um, I will say, and don't take this the wrong way, world, despite the many disadvantages that have befallen our society and our country right now in terms of the quarantine, this situation has been extremely beneficial to my writing. So I have gotten a lot of writing done. As a matter of fact, I not only have been actively world building for two series that I'm working on, one of which you already know was a major project around this time last year and continues to be a major project. But I also am, let me count up these pages. That's 5, 6.5, 8. Yeah, I am now 12 pages into a brand new pilot for television, and I am super excited about that. 12 pages into a pilot, and pages, I haven't counted yet, but it's a lot of pages of material for the associated TV Bible for that pilot. And again, this is really about the good and the bad, the light and the dark, the advantages and disadvantages. So, obviously, the disadvantages of the pandemic is that there's a pandemic, people's lives are in danger. Socially, we are isolated. Economically, we are taking a huge hit. And just culturally, things in the conversation are changing around how we need to generally just be more prepared, whether or not we can rely on government. We're thinking very critically about supply chain and the fact that we are interconnected. So all those things are happening. And like I said, in many ways, it's a shame that it had to come to this for those things to happen. But it's also great that we're having these conversations and we're having these realizations such that, and I'm getting to my point here, all of these things that we're thinking about are now in the social zeitgeist and are in the ether. And the way I've been responding to it is that because we're very much in a pre-dystopian moment, I would say. Not quite dystopian. It's probably going to get there to a certain degree if this keeps going on the way it's going. But we're certainly in like a prototypical phase of what a dystopia, or at least temporary dystopia, might look like. And so, because that's in the conversation and in the ether, it's been extremely easy for me to dive into this pilot that I'm writing, because this pilot is an apocalyptic survival horror that opens at the beginning, literally at point zero, ground zero, patient zero of the downfall of mankind, womankind very specifically. And so, for example, when I'm writing my pilot and doing my TV Bible, I don't have to wonder about what a newscast would sound like at the very beginnings of an epidemic, because all I have to do is turn on CNN, MSNBC, any number of news channels, newspapers, outlets are very actively covering the spread of coronavirus. And it's very easy to absorb the language, absorb the tone, absorb the issues that might come up in a time like this. So, a lot of my fiction right now that I'm writing for my pilot is actually real life. It's not actual fiction. Looking at human behavior and the sociological and intrapersonal effects of something like this, I don't have to make up. I'm seeing things happening around me. I'm seeing people go to the grocery store and buy up toilet paper and paper towels and then try to sell them back to society for $50, $100 a roll. I'm seeing the moments of collaboration and cohesion and togetherness, while I'm also seeing people going crazy in certain environments trying to fend for themselves. And while I'm also seeing the other side of it, which is a sense of like social selfishness, I'm seeing both. I'm seeing people who are actively taking this seriously and people who are still in denial and will still be in denial until it gets to worst case scenario. Like all these things and these individual reactions, these collective reactions are now very much in the ether. So it's very easy for me to pull from the environment and from the ether, as I've been saying, to write the pilot. Also, because I'm in that moment, in the sociological moment, it's really what I want to write, because there are a lot of feelings that I have about the pandemic, both good and bad, both socially acceptable feelings versus socially unacceptable feelings. And it's nice to be able to channel all those things through the characters and through the action that I'm writing in this pilot. So, this pilot specifically has been on my slate for the past 3 or 4 years in terms of ideas that I've been wanting to write and pursue. And I had already developed quite a bit of the first act and the prologue of the pilot, the background characters and things like that. I had already started development on it, but now was certainly an advantageous time to dust that off and use the moment to propel my writing habits, writing schedule, and just my general eagerness to get something out of me onto the page. So that's really exciting in that way. Like I said, the pandemic is obviously not good news, but there are some very surprising and unexpected side fringe benefits to being locked in your house with working technology all day, which, as a side note, I'm very fortunate to have at this point. So, in addition to writing and developing and doing creative things, I've also genuinely have been engaging in very active gratitude moments where I'm reflecting on gratitude and giving gratitude. My daughter and I pray every night. I'm not religious, but I'm a spiritual person, and I do believe that when you sit and meditate and focus your and put your thoughts out into the universe, that energy is felt and that energy is heard, and you get a response. Um, for every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction, and not all actions have to be physical. They're emotional, they're energetic, they're spiritual. So I've gotten confirmation of that, not only just recently, but like over my lifetime. And so I believe firmly in a higher power, whatever that might be. If you want to call it God, or you want to call it Allah or Yahweh, or even if you're into the Greek pantheon, that's completely up to you. But for me personally, it's not a religious thing because religion and me don't really jive. But like me and spirituality are like this. So engaging in that active giving of gratitude and reflection on the advantages that I have and the luck and the privilege that I have in this time. The fact that I and my daughter and my family can actually be rather comfortable during times like this. The fact that I still even have a job during times like this, a job that I now can work from home in, at. I don't know how to express that, excuse me. The fact that I don't have to, at least at the moment, worry about where my next paycheck is coming from. Extremely grateful. And again, this is not to brag, this is just to acknowledge the fact that I lucked out where I could have been in this situation easily. Excuse me. Easily. Like a little coughing fit there. I could have easily been in the situation where I was dealing with economic insecurity and or for this is a major issue that people are going through right now, wherein I have a job that I have to report into, but my daughter's school is out for the next month or two. That's hard in and of itself, finding babysitting for a month straight. Even if you have family members who can do so, that's challenging, but a lot of us don't even have that support anymore. With the way that times have changed or whatever, people are not retiring as young as they used to, especially the generation above us. So the time for some of us, the time of the grandpa or grandma who has retired but who's still young enough to watch a child, especially like a kindergarten, first grade age child, those times, in my opinion, are very quickly leaving us. And so for a lot of us, not just millennials, but like just people who came after us, people who came before us, finding childcare in this time of social isolation while you still have to go out and make a paycheck and make a living, that in and of itself is a challenge. And I really lucked out that I don't have that particular challenge at the moment, being that my child was enrolled in the same charter that I teach at, except in the grade school version of it. So whatever the network charter decides is the best for all of its schools, that's the protocol. that it's following for all of its New York City schools. So basically, what happens to me happens to her in terms of when we get to go back to school and when we get to leave and stay out of school. So there are a lot of things, and you can even consider this to be a moment of gratitude because I'm feeling it in my spirit. There are a lot of things that are happening now that um, could make my specific life very, very uncomfortable and very hard. Um, but I lucked out. And so, being fully aware of this, I'm trying my best to make sure I'm available to other people who are not in the same position of security, so that I can provide as much support as possible. I'll also be posting below in my video a list of places where you can get free supplies, free internet if you need it, um, free food, especially for those children who basically wouldn't be eating consistently if not for school lunch and school breakfast. So, if you are someone who's in a position of economic insecurity at this time or food insecurity, and you happen to live in the New York City area, you can feel free to look down below at the resources and go and get whatever it is you need to get. So I hope this will help someone to a degree. I'm not pretending that I'm out here being an activist or whatever. Um, I like to give respect to my activists who are actually out there putting in the work and things like that. But this is me doing what I can within my capacity at this moment in time, considering, I still have my own things I have to manage. So I hope that those of you out there are finding ways to bond together, to come together, and are finding ways to secure yourself in this time of need. And hopefully, you're not resting on your laurels if you are secure, because again, we don't really know which way this is going to go. And I hope that things are going to get better and that we'll all be able to go back to work by the end of April, and that things will be normal. But we have no idea what's going to happen with the coronavirus at this point. So that was my little segue. Just to kind of go back really quickly before I get too far away, because I mentioned this earlier on about me still working. The beautiful thing about being a teacher is that teaching can happen anywhere. And so, in light of that, my school has decided, as with most schools, both public, private, charter, and university level, we have decided to go online and go virtual and engage in e-learning and e-teaching. And that is really great. It's something that is, one, very much within my wheelhouse, and two, that I am super familiar with because I am, as you guys know, consistently building up the Bohemian Badass brand, which is an online creative e-learning space for people who want to learn how to write novels, write screenplays, write TV scripts, make films, and things like that. I haven't launched the Bohemian Badass officially yet. I'm still developing the material for it. But in terms of recording videos and creating worksheets and making things bite sized and easily digestible, I feel very, very attuned with that. So I am actually kind of excited to see how this might play out for my students. We'll see, because as much as theater means to me, I'm also not going to pretend as though I am a major content area wherein, the students are going to have to study for a theater regents, which is the New York State exam that they have to pass in order to graduate high school. There is no theater regents exam. So I don't think the students will be as strongly focused on and committed to my online courses as they would for science, math, English language arts, and history. But I'm still going to provide them. I'm still expected to provide them, and I'm still going to build out a steady, solid curriculum and a scope and sequence for us to continue our learning in theater. And I'm actually kind of excited to share that with you guys over the course of the next few weeks, I guess. You'll be seeing more of me now that I'm home and now that I'm quarantined. Um, and I have every intention of sharing my insights and feedback on how e learning can take place for the arts and for the theater space altogether. This is not only beneficial, I think, for my learning and my development, but I think it's also I think it's also important for you guys who are interested in doing online courses on the arts to see what works, what doesn't work, at least with this particular small sample, that sample being my own students. But just getting some best practices and some insights on that, I think will be helpful for myself, for you guys. And then this also will be a really nice, it's just weird again how the universe is working, but this is a very interesting pilot case test case on how the Bohemian Badass itself is going to operate. So I'm really enjoying how I can, at least on my end at this point, take a seemingly and actually terrible situation and try to glean some little benefits from it, in terms of how can I grow, how can I learn, how can I transform what I'm doing into something that is sustainable, into something that is scalable, and into a very intense learning experience for myself and for other people in the world. So it's about looking at the reality of the coronavirus situation seriously and taking it seriously, but it is also about looking at those silver linings. So, having said all that, I'm just going to move from that into what right now is happening in New York with the coronavirus and what I think artists and writers should do in this time. So, as of now, in the United States as a whole, there are over 9,000 cases that have been diagnosed. 39 states overall have completely shut down their school systems. And I think most states at this point have shut down a lot of social events and social environments like restaurants, bars, libraries, malls to a certain degree. Businesses obviously are using their own discretion in terms of how they're going to choose to operate. But every single day, I see more and more businesses either shortening their hours, or closing their doors completely. And luckily, the government was a little bit late on this. Actually, a lot of bit late, but luckily, a we're getting, most of us, families and businesses, are getting an infusion of money from the government. Families can get up to $3,000 into their accounts, into their paychecks, because of the fact that a lot of jobs have been basically taken away, shut down. A lot of people have been laid off, so people need the money. Businesses are getting cash infusions, and also as a whole, there are a lot of things that are being postponed, like federally postponed and postponed on the state level. So mortgages, at least in New York State, and I believe on a federal level, but I'm trying to stay accurate. Mortgage payments and rent payments have been suspended for the next 90 days, as far as I know. Um, what else is happening? Oh, evictions are now illegal at this point in time. We're not evicting anyone onto the streets, not only to ensure security for our nation's people, but also to prevent people from being in the streets, homeless, spreading the virus around. Right now, it's about staying in your apartment and or your house and try to minimize that connection, that physical connection at least. What else? We are getting assistance with keeping the lights and the water on, and the government is also forbidding utility companies from cutting off lights and cutting off water access for people if they cannot pay. So the government is now trying to alleviate the financial pressure, not just on the individuals, but also on every single person in that chain of economic interdependency. So just because we get mortgage relief doesn't mean that our landlords, or mortgage and rent relief, it doesn't mean that our landlords or our banks can suddenly afford to not get that money. So the government has to do something for us, then do something for them, and then do something for whoever's over them. So there's been a multi level addressing of the financial and economic issues that we are going through right now. Um, so that's the, I don't want to say the good side, that those are the initiatives that are being taken by our government to stem the problem. As I said, schools and public spaces have been shut down completely. People are being encouraged to basically stay inside and to not gather in crowds of more than 10 people. It was interesting because it went from 50 people being the limit to then 10 people just 2 days later to stay in your house 2 days after that. Um, Literally, I have business in Arizona right now. Not a business, not like a financial business, but I have business things that I have to take care of in Arizona right now. And when I called over there on a Monday, I think they weren't really taking it seriously or it hadn't hit them, and literally by Wednesday everything was shutting down. And so to me that is a very key example of how quickly things can change in situations like this where there's a pandemic. One day life is normal, and the next day, or and you, not only is life normal, and you believe that you are outside of the fray, but the next day you realize that you're a part of this struggle too, and that these things are affecting you, and that you're not as isolated or protected as you thought you were. And it's just a very realistic sort of manifestation of how the world works in times like this. Again, writing in the moment. So, as of now, most places are closed down for the next 2 weeks. My school has been closed down since March 11th, so that was last Wednesday. So, 2 days ago made the first week for me and my child and my family, the first week of like social isolation. Um, and people have become increasingly more isolated as time goes on. So, it has only been a week. It has felt like it's been a month, honestly, and it's kind of crazy. We don't go back to school for another month, which in some ways it's like, okay. And in other ways it's like, whew, that's a long time to throw you off of a schedule. You know, it's a long time to not see your students, to not see your colleagues, although we talk to each other every single day through virtual meetings. And then all of us have like really close personal friendships. So we talk just generally. And I'm not gonna lie, like I am absolutely every single day following the objectives, doing everything that I have to do for my work and for my students. At the same time, I am definitely really enjoying the ability to not have to get up at 4:30 in the morning, to not have to commute at 7 p.m. and get home at 8:30 p.m. at night. This work from home thing is really fantastic. And I see this as an opportunity to affirm to the universe what it is I ultimately want for my life as an artist, you know, um, in terms of having the flexibility to work from home, make some really great, steady money while still actively engaged in my career, and also have that time to spend on my art and to spend with my family. So, having said that, I just want to get into, because I don't want to ramble for too long. I'm going to be on here for 7 minutes max. Okay, this will be a 40-minute podcast altogether. All right. So, I want to get into what I think artists and writers should be doing at this point in time, considering that things seem to be tightening more and more and more, at least in New York, because that's where a lot of the cases are. But the rest of the world seems to be locking down more and more as well. With the exception of Asia, I think they're actually relieving things a little bit. But in this time of lockdown, I think that it's super important to keep writing, keep making your art, keep developing your art. Just write, honestly. A lot of us claim that because we have full time jobs and we have responsibilities and kids, which we do. We absolutely do. We claim that because we have all of these things, that we don't have time to write. Well, now, world, you absolutely have time to write, and you should use this time. It doesn't even have to be something that you're actively already working on. Just write for the sake of staying sane. Write journals, make podcasts, write blog posts, whatever it is you need to do. If you're having trouble motivating yourself because the pandemic is impacting you emotionally or mentally, understandable. Get online and try to find a virtual writing group where you guys have a whole Google Meetup for writing, right? A whole meetup for writing, or create one yourself. I've actually been strongly considering doing a daily write in for people who are fiction writers. I kind of wanted to make it like either dystopian specific or sci-fi specific or fantasy specific, something that's like just specific to people who are writing in a similar genre. And we can sit and introduce ourselves to each other and we can talk, or we can just sit and mute everybody and just write and just have the comfort of seeing other people around the world doing the same thing. So I've been strongly considering doing that over the next month, but being that I also still have to work full time from home and now homeschool from home, which is a huge challenge, I have to see how that would fit into like a daily schedule. It could also just be like a morning write in where I write before for an hour with other people around the world before I have to report into work. So we'll see what happens with that. But getting back to the point, use this time. If you're a painter, paint. If you are a sculptor, sculpt. If you're a photographer, take pictures. You can go outside, just don't talk to anybody who is less than 3 feet away from you and don't touch anyone. But there's plenty to photograph at this time. I mean, the streets in New York are almost empty, which is a phenomenon. It literally felt because I had to go out yesterday to go get something, but like we were driving through the streets and they were practically empty, and that is unheard of in New York City, completely unheard of. And this is a great time for photographers, editors, people who want to do photographed editorials or blogs. This is a great time to capture the world in pandemic. This is a great time for artists like that to really capture a moment. So if you're a photographer or a painter, like this is your time. This is your time. If you're a writer and you have no idea how to write an apocalyptic, post-apocalyptic, pre-apocalyptic, or dystopian novel, literally look around you and write about what you see. This is what a pre-dystopian moment, in my opinion, looks like. As a side note, FYI, the one thing that I learned at this point, which we should all know at this point, but one thing that became very clear to me is that you and your family should never depend on your government to do what it needs to do to protect you. If I learned anything, the United States is one of the most supposedly richest, most powerful countries in the world, and we still got hit hard, harder than we needed to get hit with this pandemic because we did not have the leadership in place with the right priorities in order to stem this ahead of time. I'm just thankful, again, as a side note, that this virus, as serious as it is, wasn't, for example, MERS, which I think is Middle Eastern Respiratory Syndrome, which kills 54% of people that it infects. We're lucky that we're not at that stage and it wasn't that kind of strand. But if it had been, literally half of our country would be dead at this point because our government failed to respond adequately. They were so busy engaging in politicking and trying to grab for power and finger pointing that in many ways they failed the American people. And luckily, I say this with the most respect to people who are suffering from corona right now. Luckily, the overall impact has been relatively minute considering the mortality rate. And that's what I'll say about that. But if those people had something even more serious, we would see thousands upon thousands of deaths. And we're likely to see more at this point in time. So for me, it was a very educational moment as to what I need to have on hand just throughout the year and at any point in time. The fact that you should always be adequately stocked up on supplies and paper goods and canned goods and things like that. You should always have protections in place. So those of you who are laughing at preppers or whatever, and the underground people who like to like stock in case society falls apart, they're having the last laugh right now. They really are. They're not out of toilet paper the way the rest of us are. And it just taught me to have like a go bag and something just in place for every single one of my family members and a plan. It's teaching us how to plan for these sorts of events. And again, we are lucky that the virus is as mild, I'm going to use that lightly, is as mild as it is. Because if it was something more serious, we would not be in a good place. So, back to the original point as to what you should do as an artist, look into the moment and reflect on it and use that to power your art. Again, artists, you have so much canvas right now and so much material. There's no reason why you should not be writing. Another thing that I find is even more important, and I'm going to wrap up with this because I'm over my 7 minute limit, is that this is a really wonderful time to reinvest in family and to reinvest in home. That's one of the biggest perks right now of me being able to be home. We're all together all the time, and that's a really wonderful thing for me. For some families, like other families, I get that that's not a wonderful thing. I heard a story about a divorced couple that did not move out of the house that they were living in. Like they both decided to stay, but in separate rooms. And now that there's a pandemic and they're going through the divorce process, they literally cannot leave and they're driving each other insane, which is crazy and also hilarious. And like, again, writers pick up on that. That's a very comedic story or script to write. How ironic is it? It's like they say, "Oh, I'm not gonna leave. You leave. No, you leave. No, you leave." And now that they're stuck together and they want to leave, they can't. That's an instant gold comedy right there, honestly. Back to the point. It's been great spending more time with my daughter. It's been great being able to homeschool her. Challenging, very challenging, because it's hard to homeschool and do my full time job at the same time. That's a major challenge. But it has been very interesting, let's put it that way. Figuring out what the homeschooling style is and also encouraging her to be a little bit more independent because mommy can't spend all 12 hours of our day with you in your face, making sure that you're entertained. You have to entertain yourself while I'm working, while I'm writing, but I write in the morning. And then here is our block of time that we are homeschooling and that, we're playing games and things like that. So that has been a major learning experience, but it's also been a really wonderful one having my daughter by me and just spending more time with her, spending more time with my parents and my brother and things like that. So if you have family members that you've wanted to spend more time with, a spouse that you've wanted to spend more time with, a child or just extended family you've wanted to spend more time with, use this time wisely to do that. Like I said, it's a really terrible time and it's uncertain, it's scary, it's unsettling. But this is the opportunity for you to try to make the best of it and to pull positive things out of a horrible situation. And I hope that positivity includes you learning from this situation, you preparing to be more secure right now and in the future, you working on your art, working on your writing, and also you spending more productive, constructive time with your family. So that's all I have to say, y'all. I'll be back next week with an update. I'll be a little bit more revealing as to what I'm working on because it was easy to stay in a year of silence in a world that was filled with noise. But now that the whole world is silent, I should probably use my voice and my experiences to like not only keep myself galvanized, but also galvanize other people. So, suspending the year of silence for the term of this pandemic right now. And you guys will hear from me again next week. So, I'm going to plan to do my podcast at least every single Monday until I get back into school. And that's probably when I'll taper back a little bit more. So, I look forward to coming back. And I hope that you guys stay safe, stay healthy, stay creative, stay badass, keep it indie, and I will talk to you guys next week. Mwah. Bye. And stay hopeful because things will get better. Bye.